see later on what used to really happen in this burnt offering. For us to really understand what is being talked about here, we need to go back to the idea of a burnt offering. Now, when you look at the Old Testament, when one reaches that level of a burnt offering, of course, one would bring a lamb or a goat and you bring that to the priest. Now, after all the rituals have been done, this person comes and they lay their hands on that animal and it is killed. Now, something unique about the burnt offering is this. When the offering is brought before the priest, first of all, this offering has to be inspected. It has to be checked. From the outside, even as far as the inside. Because in the Old Testament form of worship, which is really much more in the same line as today, a sacrifice would not be allowed to God if it had any defect. You wouldn't bring a goat, you wouldn't bring a lamb that has got 3 legs. You wouldn't bring a goat which has got 1 ear or 1 eye. Whatever animal that was brought to the Lord had to be perfect in form. So what the priest will do is that first of all he has to do an inspection of this animal that you have brought before it is offered to the Lord. So a physical examination will be conducted from the outside to make sure that it has got no defect. Because you are offering a sacrifice to a holy God, to a perfect God. And the sacrifice in itself just has to be equal to the person that you're offering to. It would be an insult to offer anything less to God. Only a perfect sacrifice would suffice. Nothing less than that. So of course the priest will begin to examine this animal and check it from the outside and see, okay, it qualifies. Then the animal is killed. After it is killed, the priest will not only stop as far as a physical examination on the outside, but also an examination on the inside. So we see now how that after the priest is done from the outside, the animal is cut open and all the internal organs are also checked for any defects. You wouldn't offer an animal to God that has got an infection on the inside. So an animal has to be completely perfect. It has to be in perfect form, from the outside to the inside. Otherwise it will be disqualified from being offered. So we see how that here the Apostle Paul is trying to bring about the idea of the burnt offering in relation to the true spiritual act of worship. So he brings about this background that no, present your bodies to God as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing. This is your spiritual act of worship. So we're seeing from that background that this animal, first of all, undergoes through all that examination. Now, after going through that examination, the last part, of course, is where this animal is sacrificed and offered to God. Now, as compared to these other forms of sacrifice, one interesting part about the burnt offering is that in these other sacrifices, you find that maybe a priest will get a portion, and the other portion goes to the person offering, the other portion goes to God. It's like there was a division that was taking place. But in this particular offering, we discovered that everything was burnt to God. There was no remainder that was left. So the whole animal is going to be burnt to God completely. No reservations. So now, coming from that background, we are seeing how that here, the idea of us offering our living sacrifices is now, the picture is now coming into place. What the Apostle Paul is really trying to bring about and trying to communicate. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is a spiritual act of worship. The Apostle Paul now here begins to encourage. He says, no, offer your bodies to God as a living sacrifice. In the same way that that burnt offering was given to God, in the same way that it was given completely to God, that is the way that we ought also to lay down our lives and offer them to God as the true spiritual act of worship. Like I said, there are many ideas that come about worship. But here we're now being given a standard as the true act of spiritual worship, where one lays down their life and gives themselves completely to God, in totality, with no reservation. Not only that, also bearing in mind the other part, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. We remember that part where the high priest, where the priest will begin to examine this animal from the outside to the inside. Before this sacrifice is offered to God, it has to undergo through that examination, whereby it's clean outside and inside, in a way in which it also applies to us. If one has to be a worshipper, in the context of Scripture, not in the context of our modern day, if one has to truly be a worshipper, it means that one has to offer their bodies, offer their lives completely to God. This is the true spiritual act of worship. All these things that we do are just an expression of worship. When a person lies prostrate